Welcome to Know the Rules of the Game podcast. I'm your host, Desirée Patno, CEO and President of Women in the Housing Real Estate Ecosystem, NAWRB, and Desirée Patno, Enterprises, Inc., DPE, Real Estate Brokerage, Advisor, and Investor for Amicus Brain, Innovations, Inc., and the Chief Strategic Officer for Zulu Time and publisher of NAWRB Magazine and the NAWRB Report. I'm honored to have as our guest, Davia Temin, and President and CEO of Temin and Company. Today's rule for leading through crisis to chaos. Welcome.
Thank you, Desiree. It's lovely to be here.
Love it, love it. So let's start off real quick here and tell us a little about your company and a fun fact about you.
Okay, so the company is a boutique management consultancy that's focused on issues of crisis and reputation management. And we create, enhance, and save reputations for organizations, for corporations, not-for-profits, diplomats, some countries. I mean, it's a sort of a wide brief, but we always do this with integrity, honor, compassion. So we try to do it at the very top of the game, not at the bottom. And I also have a very large practice coaching CEOs of all kinds and boards, and work at the corporate board level. So it's a broad array, but it all actually works together and informs one another. And I started it about 23 years ago when I was head of all marketing for GE Capital. And in fact, GE funded me to start the company and became the first client. So that was pretty nice. It was a great springboard to get into business. And I haven't really looked back since then. So we, of course, in this day and age, are right in the middle of everything. And so we've been thinking about crisis for a long time. And how you can help impact it for the better. So fun fact is, I mean, we write and sometimes a spokesman for companies, so a lot around communications and leadership stuff.
Right.
What people probably don't know is that I come from a family where pretty much everybody's a scientist. And I actually learned how to use a slide rule before I could read. I mean, when I was really little. And I loved slide rules. I loved playing with it. If I were to have been born now, I probably would have been a scientist as opposed to where I went today. But I'm happy to sort of combine the two. So we work with a lot of things that are scientific, and I love it. So I love science. So that's something probably a lot of people don't know.
Very cool. Well, if you think about the fun fact of science is really you're solving problems in crisis. You're helping them, and you have to see that vision. So yes. I think your background and your love as a child really connected that. So kudos. I mean, you're behind the scenes. You give so much more depth because of that ability to do that, right? I think that's just fantastic. So technicality of having a cell phone go off while we're talking, I gotta love it. We live and learn, right? Sure. We will turn this off. Anyway, so I'd like to do a little deep dive about you. And your accomplishments are amazing. You've worked with some of the most talented and impactful leaders in the world, helping them to refine and strengthen the vision, voice, and market position in times of crisis opportunity. What better time? I mean, talk about a perfect storm of a pandemic on top of underlying currents, right?
Yeah.
We were really talking about that before, we got on the podcast this morning. And so you're a frequent speaker around the world on crisis, reputation, culture management, leadership, corporate governance, women's leadership, resilience, and what board and leaders need to know about media.
Yeah.
How many leaders, what they said 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 30 years ago, versus then what they just said today. And artificial intelligence, very interesting. I think that brings back into the science we were just talking about, right?
Yes, it does, yeah.
And as an advisor to, and working with Amicus Brain as an AI, so I
about
that play in the aging population, which is all about the news and subject right now. And then also you're nationally recognized writer, commentator, and expert in her fields, as she has appeared on CBS, CNN, NBC, Bloomberg, PBS, ABC, Wall Street Journal, and numerous other publications and networks around the world. A very interesting fact, our next issue of NAWRB Magazine for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, we're featuring former CBS President Liz Multi.
Okay.
So there you go, right? So small world. As you were talking about 22 years ago, you're working with backed from GE, which I'd like to highlight a little bit. It's so hard for women to get funding. You know, we talk about the statistics all the time as far as women about having access to capital and what that's like. And NAWRB being one of the resource partners, is only 9 of us for the SBA. Here you're able to take your expertise, having your client say, we'll fund you because we love you and we want to keep you and showcase and highlight you. What was that like? If we take a moment to take a pause on that, to have someone, now that you can reflect on it, how important was that to start your business?
It was critical. So, you know, for years, people had told me I should start my own company. And I didn't see it. I didn't get it. It didn't come together in my mind. And I thought I was a corporate person and I was going to be a corporate person for life. But for GE, I went around the world and I was trying to find strategic partners, sort of for crisis, for opportunity, for marketing strategy, et cetera, in places around the world. I didn't find one big company that would do it. Because I found their quality varied around the world. So I was going to pick the best of all, put them together in our own network, and then have a really A+ network for GE around the world. And we were in pretty much every country. What I found was, when I was looking for the really best strategists and thinkers around these kinds of issues, public strategies, if you will, I couldn't find very many that I thought were that good, one. And two, of the ones I found that were that good, not a one of them was run by a woman. And all of a sudden I thought to myself, you know, here I am, a woman who's head of this big division. I'm looking to hire more women. I bet this is an opportunity for me to start something. And all of a sudden I sort of got it. I got what that opportunity was. And, you know, I knew I was good enough to do it. And maybe some people thought, okay, but it came together. So when I went to them and said that that was what I wanted to do, that was when, luckily, you know, they said, well, let us help you out.
See, that was the perfect storm to play into. Now you can look back, you know, 22 years later and go, what an opportunity, and have a corporate entity to be part of that and play it forward. And you leveraged all those experiences to where you are today. And that's why you're so sought out, in my opinion. Your experience is who you are. You're completely unique in your platform and the nimbleness of your company, because it's not, you are the driver with your team versus then being a reciprocal, right? I think it's so powerful.
And you know what? You know what? The ability to pivot, the nimbleness, you just put your finger right on it. That's what every one of us is being called to do right now. And man, you better be able to model what you preach, right? And it's not easy.
Yeah, well, that's where, you know, just like our conversation we had last night before we got on the call, and how you helped me reset, repurpose. I mean, it's so powerful. So we can talk about a little bit, but let's continue. That was just part of it. So then you had the Schroders and Scudder's and City Investment Bank and Columbia Business School. You have honors at Swarthmore College. You serve on their board. For 9 years, you served as the first vice chair of the board of Girl Scouts. I love it. Tammy Bunnell, who's on our leadership council, she teaches that every Girl Scout is a CEO in their own right. And she loves wherever she goes, and she's been doing it for years, a huge component of that. And you're also the chair of the National Fund Development Committee, originating their $1 billion campaign for girls. Right on. Yep. The largest fundraising campaign for girls in the world. Talk about that for 1 minute. That is unbelievable.
Well, that continued. In fact, they just got to the billion mark. I've been off that board for a little bit of time because, usually it's 9 years and then you move on. I'm still on the board of Girl Scouts of Greater New York. I live in New York because I love it so much, and you want to contribute to these wonderful girls. And there are 60 million living Girl Scout alumni in this country.
60 million?
So you think about what a powerful cohort that is. And, you know, they're from all walks of life. They're from every persuasion. They're all, everything. And, you know, the goal of Girl Scouts is to create girls of courage, confidence, and character to make the world a better place.
Oh, whoa.
Can you, I mean, so is there something that we'd all want to support? Well, boy, that would be it. Everybody talks about a pipeline. That's it. There we go.
I love it. I mean, we're not even halfway through. I've learned something. You're also the chair of the board of Video Volunteers, an India-based investigative media nonprofit, and sits on the boards of advisory boards of ProPublica. I mean, think about video right now. Zoom, what we saw in the stock. We saw what, you know, Microsoft Teams is coming out, all these other different platforms, because it is the wave of not the future, but instantaneously. Exactly right. That's fantastic. The night
Badgett. You know, Walter Badgett was an economist in England. So when you're in England, nothing is pronounced the way it looks.
Thank you. I was like, okay, that's completely off there. Committee for Economic Development, Harvard Women's Leadership Board, yes. Women's Corporate Directors, WCD, Girl Scouts of Greater New York. We talked about that. And we could go on and on and on. This is unbelievable. And also the member of Columbia's Women Creating Change Leadership Council and serves as an advisor to AI Startups and Chinook and Springboard. Again, we've got to talk a bit about that, because the AI component of the world change is so powerful. So and I mean, crazy resume you have with being honored and so many different things. And so we will definitely have this up on after the podcast, so you can read more in depth, because all the different things. So thank you. So let's set the stage here a little bit. We're no longer in crisis. We're in chaos. Here are some rules that will help you lead to yourself as far as your family, community, and a company. I really want to focus on that even if you're an individual, even if you're a major corporate head, like we had Noel Massey from UPS with 200,000 employees out of 450, we talked about how, you know, what it was like to have a storm. You know, you think of a typical snowstorm. Oh, yep. My package didn't get delivered, right? And then going through that crisis, I mean, into chaos now. I mean, stacked after stacked after stacked of most altering changes going on, of the underlying currents. We talk about you can't judge the face, you know, what's happening behind the personal and professional issues. How do we deal that with honor and integrity and your reputation intact? From one of the most sought after crisis strategists in the world, welcome. Let's go and let's dive into it. So I think a really good segment is to also say how where we've been working for the last 11 years for NAWRB's Council, as the chairman for the Diversity Inclusion Leadership Council, the NDLC, we created 10 women leadership principles to help women in the real estate and housing ecosystem become more effective leaders and empower other women to reach their full potential, which you really are an incredible facet of doing this on a global scale and really looking at corporate America and so many different levels. So let's talk about the rules and how you've developed it and where they came from, and give us a little history, and let's take a deep dive. Let's go for it. It's all Davia.
So thank you. You know, crisis has been with us forever, obviously. No human being on the face of the earth lives and dies without having multiple crises in their lives. No organization does either. Where we are now, I mean, it's very interesting to me because I've been writing about it and thinking about it. And I have a sort of column on Forbes.com on reputation matters. So I've been thinking about it for a long time and have gathered over that time about 175 rules of crisis management. Now, none of them are applicable to a single crisis, but in different things, you pick and you choose and you put them together to get through this in the right way. Now, because we are going through the crisis of all crises, certainly for this century, possibly more, everybody's thinking about crisis management. Everybody's all of a sudden an expert on crisis management, etc. But what I worry about is that they're taking lessons from one small slice or maybe a couple of thin slices and then extrapolating. And I don't think you can do that. I think that in crisis, the devil and God are in the details, and they're each different. So, and you have to treat them as such, or you could get in trouble, because even if you have a crisis plan, it's probably not just completely applicable from one thing to another. You have to tailor it. And that takes a lot of thinking through. So as I've been thinking about the difference right now, and I don't think we're in crisis anymore. You look at crisis, you look at how many times your newspaper says the word crisis in one day. I stopped counting, the world stopped counting. I tried to Google it once and you got into the millions and hundreds of millions, like ridiculous. So, but it's not that, because crisis, whether it's terrible or not, generally has a causality and a logic to it. You know, if you have a crisis, let's say your plant burns down, has a fire. You know that if you have good relations with the fire department and the government in the locality you're in, you call the fire department, they will come. They will use flame retardant or water or whatever it is, and they will put out that. And if you have insurance, you will be covered and blah, 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 and you will eventually put it back together again. Where we are now, I'm going to read you a definition of chaos.
Sure.
Okay, so chaos defined. Chaos is defined as a state of extreme confusion and disorder. The word chaos derives from a Greek word meaning chasm or void, and also refers to the formless state of matter before the cosmos was created. In math and science, chaos describes a system that will develop in wildly different ways with only tiny changes to the initial conditions. Does that sound familiar to you?
Wow. Powerful, powerful.
An individual gets a virus from a bat in China, or the butterfly flaps its wings, and we have a pandemic here, right? We are all connected. It is all connected. But chaos, it gets almost so dense. You talk about the fog of war. I believe you have the fog of crisis or chaos. You can't tell up from down. You can't tell the figure from the ground. Your internal compass stops working. No, actually, that's not true. Your external compass stops working. So you have to rely on your internal compass. And you also, causality gets shattered. So causality means it all is like in an overlapping, entangled ball. So causality would mean you have strand A over here. If you pull on it, the end of strand A here would go up. It would have some. In chaos, that's not so. In chaos, you can pull on strand A and something else is going to happen. So that makes it much more dangerous. The rules of causality, of logic, sometimes of leadership don't apply. They are very different. And so that's what I mean in talking about rules of chaos. The first thing is, the first rule, this is for crisis or chaos really, is to deny denial. And you can see this in this pandemic crisis and in every crisis over and over and over again. Denial says every human being, when something bad goes wrong, spends a moment, or organization spends a moment saying, this cannot be happening. This is not happening to me. And if it is happening, it's not that bad.
Right.
And if it's that bad, it'll be over really quickly. And if it won't be over quickly, nobody will notice. And if somebody notices, oh, well, it happened to those guys down the road and their stock came back and they were fine, so it'll be fine for us. It's a layer and layer and layer of denial. Right? So while you're denying, the crisis starts to go worse and worse and worse and worse. The only time it stops is when you, one, admit it. You deny the denial. You say, no, we really have a problem. We better look for solutions. And at that point, you flatten the curve. I've been doing this for a long time, and now so you put in the solution, that stops the ascent as opposed to flattening the curve. That stops the ascent, and you then start to fix it. Depending on how long you've been in denial, It's here where it's not so bad. It's here where it's worse. It's up here where maybe there's no fixing it. Right? So you can't go into denial. You simply also can't think it's over now. Just because you're ready for it to be over, just because you cannot stand being in your house or apartment for one more nanosecond, just because you can't stand wearing a mask for one more nanosecond, I mean, you'll go nuts. Just because you're ready for it to be over, that doesn't mean it's over.
Right.
Oh, the problem is it's not just a marathon as opposed to a sprint, which people are saying, right? It's a marathon that is run at the speed of a sprint.
Yeah.
And it can be endless. This could be 2 years. This could be 5 years. You know, I mean, this is that serious. So take it seriously, right? Become a long distance runner. You have to become a long distance runner. So that means you have to keep yourself well tuned. You meditate, you get in shape, you exercise, you eat fruit, you take care of yourself for the long distance, right? And so that's one rule. The second rule.
Well, let me interrupt you real quick. Thanks. I'd like to talk about that rule. The denial rule, I think is really had affected at the highest level so many people, because those who were in denial that this was only going to be a phase caused a lot of mental stress on not only whether it be on the person or the company or those around them from a family aspect on it. And I think that the quicker we could make an analogy to like flying. You know, we are of age that we were flying before we got an airplane, that we could freely get on an airplane and never have the security checks we have, and to go through where we disrobed and had physical, bodies going through it. We'll never go back to the norm unless we're in a commercial plane and we own our own plane or something. And we had to adjust, and the quicker we adjust, that it's just part of the process, we're okay. And now, you talk about the denial. I think that the core of making sure that we adjust that, whether it stays or not, that I think from an instant standpoint, if you could elaborate, I know because of confidentiality and everything else, but like cite an example that denial has. You talked about the flattening of the curve, which you've heard so much from Dr. Fauci and everything else about, from the virus itself, that if you do it at a lower scale, it's quicker to react, and you have ability to continue to react, versus at a high level, you might have so much damage you might have caused that you have to, just abandon ship, or what are you going to be doing that? So can you elaborate on something that would be like an instance?
Yeah, I sure can. Now, I can do it from other kinds of companies, because I would never, as you said, I would never talk about anybody I work with. I mean, that's, you wouldn't have much of a profession. Right. And besides which, they were all handled so beautifully. So talk about cybersecurity, right? And I mean, Target had a big problem with cybersecurity, and it was basically caused the Target CEO to have to resign, changes in their board, etc. Because one of the things when you start to get a cyber attack, and we now know better, but these were early days. First of all, you don't learn about it right away. I mean, you don't. It takes a while for the reports to come in. But by that point, either you may have fixed it, or you may think that it's only at a certain level. That's what they did. They didn't realize how big it was. They didn't realize how widespread it was. They didn't tell people for a very long time. Now, some people like me might have said, listen, the minute you learn this, you're going to have to go out. This is people's financial security here. They didn't, and a lot of people don't. So we don't even know how many people have had it who haven't gone out, who haven't told us about this. And, and we muddle through, and we do muddle through a lot. So, however, in that particular case, of course, they vastly underestimated the level of how many people have been affected. It started to come out when people's security was breached, and their identities were breached, and then it was traced back. So then they didn't own it, they didn't come out with it, somebody else came out with it, people found it, it was an investigative situation. They lowballed it, it turned out it was much bigger. They were behind the curve the whole time.
Right.
They weren't flattening a curve, they were behind it. So that is one case where successive decisions that were sort of in denial a little bit and certainly not going out publicly with it,
right,
served them poorly. There may be other places that made the exact same decisions where they were well served. So this is not easy. And sometimes I'm in the position of saying to people, you better go out with this now, when maybe if they didn't, nobody would know. But
right.
if somebody did, they would be so far behind. It would be so much worse for them to have it discovered by an investigative reporter as opposed to their being straight with their public. And
right. Well, that's a perfect example of how each case can be so different, same circumstances, but the underlying current, the effects of the type of company, the size of the company, the current state of the world or dynamics around it. And that's where someone like you would come in that would be an expert in dealing with this, because things are evolving. I say that we're now in a very fluid market. There's no more what happened yesterday is perfect for tomorrow, because it's changing so rapidly. I mean, look at our every hour on the hour conversations versus then what happened then. So it's very, very different. So thank you for that. So excellent. So you were going to talk about rule number 2. Let's.
Okay. So rule number 2 is to forget any assumptions you may have about how things work.
Okay.
Right? We all make assumptions. We all assume the world is working in whatever kind of logical or illogical way it works. In chaos, those assumptions cannot hold true. They don't. That's the definition of chaos, right? The things that you expect to have happen don't. So, it's not just pivoting. Usually I say you have to pivot. Usually I say you have to improvise, improvisation training. I sometimes work with an improv troupe for senior leadership, right? We're beyond that even now. You've got to take everything as tabula rasa. You've got to be ready to innovate on every single level, given the information you have in the moment.
Right.
Right.
Well, okay. So this morning I was on a very early in the morning on a family office call, and they were talking about the luxury market. We were talking about a few minutes about that. And the luxury market is that if you're doing makeup or perfume, how are you going to go in and address your customer base? And when you talk about pivot and change on the moment, they would be defunct if how you try a new perfume or a new brand or a new thing. You talk about crisis management, major money, especially in the high-end market around the world. And so their thought is that if you came out have a dialogue, interactive, that you actually, were putting the makeup on virtually, you were interacting with taking a phone and taking a picture of the person, seeing the wrinkles, seeing all the, the hydration and all that kind of stuff, the color complex. You talked about the coloring has changed and how that you're like, as a customer, what that looked like. And you're like, okay, well, if you don't have my color anymore, I need to find someone who does. But in that instant, they said, well, one of the things we're working on is that if you're online and you're interacting with us, we'll reach out to you to say, hey, would you like, can we give you a call and we can talk on the phone, to have that person not robotically in text, because the misinterpretation of a text or a message versus hearing that passion, hearing that voice, selling them on the experience is so different. And I believe that your rule, number 2, really amplifies the pivotalness, the nimbleness of changing on the mark, right?
Yeah. Everybody's going to have to do it commercially, psychologically, operationally, for your own life. I run a company. We have gorgeous offices in New York City, expensive, gorgeous offices in New York City, and nobody's there. I already have half of my workforce have been working remotely for a long time, just because, I found just the right people. They can live wherever the heck they want to live. I don't care. I just want them, right? But then we have to have the office work, and it's, you know, we have people in all the time. It's empty. We are learning to do everything. We have salons in person with champagne pouring. Did that all the time with great speakers. I wanted to do it again. We had to reinvent it online. So the next thing is going to be, as you're talking about, is going to be a hybrid, sort of a hybrid between a personal and an online experience. Colleges and your universities are going to go to a hybrid model. Nobody knows exactly what the fall is going to look like because we don't know about the second wave. But I'll tell you that everybody's thinking about these hybrid experiences, and that mix of hybridness will change as the pandemic changes, as our society changes. And, you know, the old normal is going to be old, right? I don't know. Everybody uses new normal too much. We got to have a new name for that. But whatever our future is going to hold, if we can look at it as exciting, as full of opportunity, as opposed to just anxious and enervating, I think we have a chance to create that.
So a couple things, you hit on some incredible hot topics. Saks Fifth Avenue having so many different, or Fifth Avenue having so many vacancies prior to COVID, and that platform, a lot of companies have closed and repurposed. You had 450, I just read, businesses that were vandalized in New York City. And you talked about the expensiveness and the beautiness of downtown New York buildings. What do you see in that change of environment for the nimbleness of a company that has a big footprint, whether it be the Macy's and other things that are on the platform, versus the smaller companies and the boutique companies like you and I, on how to retool those commercial buildings is going to go? When you talk about crisis mode, if we have a second wave or another pandemic, or more importantly, they're talking about we're going to have something like we had the Spanish flu, that it's going to be the plague that's coming, and this is just a prelude to it because scientists have predicted that we were going to have this many years ago. That being said, that crisis moment of repurposing that commercial space and what's looked like, I mean, I saw so many things on New York City, and yet if you think about New York is going to come back to the moment to where we've gone through the 9/11, we went through the real estate market in the 90s being so bad, yet New York always bounces back.
Yep.
So
and that's what I love about it.
A lot. I mean, everyone does, and that's why. But they started talking about the numbers being down in Christmas before COVID, about people coming and shopping and the closure of buildings there. How do you see that in the change of the environment of New York?
Okay.
So being based there.
And I'm sure some of the closure in December and previous is because of the internet and because of commerce on the net, web-based commerce, and that's going to continue. Of course, it's just gotten a boost. I happen to love Amazon. Thank you. They have helped me. I'm out on the tip of Long Island. The very, very, very tip used to be just a fishing village, and if it weren't for Amazon, I wouldn't even be sitting down, right? I mean, so we're all retooling. But I don't think that someplace like New York is going to go away, just like I don't think that residential colleges and universities are going to go away.
Okay.
There is something in the human experience of being able to be together. I mean, we're together. I see you. You're sitting right in front of me. Right. I mean, this is better than nothing. This is way better than nothing. And I go to science fiction. I love science fiction. I love Isaac Asimov. He predicted this in the 50s, right?
Wow.
So, and you'd have a room where the whole wall would be a screen, right? Picture this, whole wall would be a screen. You'd have half of a dining room table up against the screen, and somebody else would have the same dining room table in their place 50,000 miles away or whatever. And you'd sit down and it would feel like you were having dinner with somebody.
Oh, cool.
Except you couldn't touch.
Right.
Touch is important, and that closeness. This pandemic, this one, maybe it'll last 2 years, maybe it'll last 5 years, but they will find both of therapeutics to treat it, vaccines to stop it from happening. You know, at the end, for people, they've already just found, I guess Oxford announced today that they found an antiviral, a drug that helps people when they are on ventilators not die.
Yes, yes.
So look, at this will happen, and maybe it's going to be 2 years. At the end of 2 years, we will go back. I've always been, you know, for a really long time, a critic of open space stuff. I thought we were going the wrong way. In my offices, we each have offices, and you have a door, you shut it. It's quite beautiful. I mean, it's really beautiful. And you have your privacy, so you can think, so you can write, so you can bore into it. We're going to go back to that, I think. I mean, and probably not just plexiglass. A client of mine that is huge, and they went to totally open plan. Long before this, when I was walking down their halls, there was Purell at between every row of desks.
Right.
They knew then, and that was you know, just for the common cold.
Yeah. Well,
so we're going to go back, but we'll figure out something. I know this. We've got innovation here in this country, and that and creativity, and we've got a whole new group of young people coming out who can be creative and innovative in the right kinds of ways, in a passionate way. So, you know, we'll figure it out.
Agreed. And I think the other thing is that our love of making it work in some capacity, because one of the things that, if you take the old adage that, you know, stop and smell the roses, as a plant fanatic, we're really going to really embrace the opportunity to say hi, to be in person, to experience the human touch in some capacity, and that yearning to do it with a sense of openness, without feeling a guilt of hurting someone because of germs or because of something that's going to help. And the second thing is, I know the spread of without getting colds, getting flus, and getting, you know, normal sicknesses, I myself is so much healthier because of practicing and being sheltered in place, of not traveling, that I've been healthy and phenomenally because of that development, you know, because we're not germing back and forth. So huge.
Finally, I just want to say, finally, you know, airlines are now recirculating their air more. You know, so they should have been doing that a long time ago. So hotels, HVAC systems, they're bringing more air in and circulating it more. Do I trust that they're doing it enough? No. And is that going to have to change? Yes. But I think now there are some good things that are going to come from it. We have to assure that. We have to make that happen. Each one of us has to make that happen.
Exactly. I'm not going to pick a hotel based on how luxurious it is and how beautiful it looks. I'm going to pick a hotel on how their sanitation, their cleanliness, and their ability to have, you know, filtration systems, and the crews that clean it are going to be that I can trust that it's being done the right way. Because
and you know what I've always done? I've chosen on whether I can open my window.
I like that idea. I like, you know, because of, they say that the venting system can cause that. So love that. And the other thing is that when you talk about trust, I don't know if you saw the article. I know we're going a little off here, but there's an article that came out just yesterday about where a doctor had been in New York, traveled to LA, and he came as a retired doctor who had dementia, was going to go placed in a very expensive high-end home in LA. And on his way, 42 people have died because that when he was on the airplane, he didn't write down that he was exposed to COVID. And 42 people have passed away since then, and they have no idea how many other people have passed away because they started doing tracing back and forth that were on the airplane. So when you talk about, you know, trusting and response and going through of the humanity and compassion, it's not about just you, it's about affecting everyone around it. So love that rule. So rule number 3, you came up and you said you can come out of crisis stronger and better if forever change. Make that your explicit goal.
Okay. All right. So these are you're on a different set of rules. I got sets of rules up and down. I got 8 of my chaos rules. Deny, denial. Let me tell you what my number 2 rule is that I'm leaving everybody here with out of 3. These are my 3 rules. All right.
Okay.
But anybody can ask me, what are your 25 top rules? I can answer that too. All right. So my second rule is, first is deny, denial. Second is, people will remember how you show up in a crisis. So know you are defining yourself or your organization by your response. Make sure in every instance of a crisis response, you channel your higher self, highest self, or your mission, your vision, your credo, if you're an organization, and your integrity, your trustworthiness, your humanity, and your compassion every single time. And that is really hard because in a lot of things, and I see this all the time, long before where we are now,
Right.
When something hurts badly enough, you will do anything, and I mean anything in your power to make it stop. And sometimes those things that you would do in wholesale layoffs with very little severance, if any, or very little care of what that's going to do to the people who you have to let go. You'll do anything, and some of it is not with high integrity. And there's some organizations, frankly, who do what I do, who will go along with that and even counsel it. And I believe that in that crisis, it's not just that in crisis, you can't waste a good crisis, or, in crisis, there's opportunity. That's what people are saying, of course. But you define your moral center at every juncture in a crisis. What you're willing to take, how you're willing to take it, how you show your humanity. And you don't let liability concerns or legal trump your, supersede. I changed my wording. Supersede your humanity. You just don't. You don't. You can still do it because, right?
Right. I love it. I love it. I know it's, back to the scenario, you only have 175 rules of crisis management and 8 chaos rules. So, the rule number can go crazy. So yeah, we'll define the rules. But no, I agree with you 1,000% in the sense that when you run your company or your mental state from fear, liability, and like you said, supersede that of the mission or clarity. If you bring it back home and say, you have to sleep with yourself at night. When you lay your head on the pillow, are you comfortable with yourself that you did your best that you could do? And it goes back to the phrase of you saying, Desiree, to help people, to help others, you need to make sure that you have a center. And that's what you did to me. You said, Desiree, let's reset, reground to continue to help others, because that's your life. That's what you love. That's what drives you. And people are meant to do it in different ways, in different capacities. And that's where I think this whole opportunity to leverage resources, which is what NAWRB is about, and what you've done and your experiences and your journey and where you are today, you're helping them from, you've gone, and the crisis is always going to be a crisis in some capacity, because there's always going to be different crises, right? And then when you compound them so quickly, you become a chaos. It becomes a chaos. And how do you break it down to where you can manage it one by one?
Well, so here's the thing in chaos, and this isn't one of the 3 rules. This is another, one of those amorphous rules out there. In chaos, what matters is intent and direction. So your true north, if you will, what's your North Star? If you can define what your goal is, what you're going toward, what your intent is, then, you may have to go a little bit backwards to go forwards. You may have to do whatever you have to do. If you remember what that North Star is, what your internal compass says that you need to do. And again, this is for an organization. This is for a corporate entity. This is for a college or university. This is for an individual. This is for each of us as individuals. And this is certainly for leaders.
Yeah.
And I think we must demand this of our leaders, by the way. we must demand it. If you've got that intent and then you are trustworthy in sort of always going to that intent, that's what gets you out of chaos.
Yeah, no, I totally embrace that, because one of the things we started on here at NAWRB is we started an Embed the Vision Challenge. And if you can't dream of a youth, and we don't know of any program out there that really addresses this in a big way, that if we take our children who are preschool and give them the vision to be a scientist, a doctor, an attorney at a young age, but someone who's just a little bit older than them, like in high school, versus then the Katherine Johnsons of the world, or the lady who just, it zoogs me who her name was, who just went to space and actually went 38,000 feet below sea level. She's she went in space first as the first woman, and now you saw that, right?
Yeah.
That, oh my gosh. Well, okay, so me being 60 this year, she's my age, okay? We can relate because she's 68. But as a preschooler, to see someone that looks like me at a younger age, that I could go, I want to be like that and continue that vision, is where you're leading us.
Critical. It's critical. And I mean, it's Girl Scouts, by the way, but it's way more than that too. I mean, I think that that's what we are, young people, because they're watching. And as I say, people look at how you show up in a crisis. So, and they sure look at you and how you show up in chaos, and how we help get out of this chaos right now.
Well, think of being home. Think of right now, all the people who are on telecommunicating, or who are running their children's homeschooling, are being forced to manage everything remotely at home, and that the children are now seeing them react on the phone during business. And if you didn't have two people helping you do that, as a spouse, a significant other, an adult child, or an older teenager, you got a lot of issues.
Yeah, I have really one of my top people. She has a very little child at home. I guess maybe one and a half, and then an older one. And so she has been working for us, and she's critical to keeping it going with the baby right here. So sometimes I could get to meet the baby and see the baby. And then, the other child over here, how she's done it, I don't know. But I will say this week, all of a sudden she sounded so much better. And I said, "How are you?" She said, "Great." And I went, "Okay, why was that?" She said, "Well, the baby's in daycare." They reopened very carefully, and all of a sudden it was the weight of the world.
Right. In time management, I mean, we're saving the commute time, but we're now combating it with, okay, we have homeschool. What's that look like? Are they still passing their grades? Are they still taking care of the animals? Well, you used to have the nanny take care of the animals, or no, you don't have housekeepers coming. Who's cleaning? So we could go on that for days.
Yeah.
But that in itself really lends itself to not only management crisis for business, but chaos for the personal,
for the individual
effects of life, of family, and that underlying current. Because we talk a whole mental issue. We've had another podcast. So let's talk about the coming out of the number rule 3 that we talked about, coming out of a crisis stronger and better, forever change. I think that we did a deep dive into that one about how companies are pivoting, that you see all of a sudden companies are just, really make a change, whether it's a big company or a little company. How do you give someone, what kind of advice would you give that in that rule, and what would be some commonality to go with that?
So let me just give you again the rule number 3, which is that you can come out of a crisis stronger, better, finer than you were before it started, even though it will be forever changed. You don't have to, I mean, some may have to, but go bankrupt or whatever, but you can come out of it. And you have to make that your explicit goal again. So the world within crisis or chaos or whatever that we're facing now is full of micro decisions. tiny little micro decisions. We are making them every second of our day. We always are. They have to be brought up to the fore more, to our consciousness more, because when we're in crisis, we actually don't know what's going to help get us out, what's going to help us make the crisis worse. We sometimes just don't know. So you have to consider every single little crisis. And I believe that what you do is you have for yourself sort of an explicit goal and intent of how you want to be and who you are and how you're going to get through it. And then the other thing is you have to be able to tolerate the pain. You have to be able to tolerate the ambiguity. You have to be able to tolerate the I don't know what to do-ness of it all. My God, I don't know what to do in this situation. And you have to slog it through thing by thing by thing by thing, not giving up. Maybe you have to rest. You know, there's a saying, a Buddhist saying for the Daruma doll, which is a sort of a Buddhist, a paper mache doll of the Buddha, round on the bottom, 7 times down, 8 times up. It means they push you down, they knock you down, you figure out a way to come back. So 7, for myself, I mean, especially absorbing everything that all our clients do too, and having to do that, I think it's like about 5,329 times down, but 5,330 times up. It's that +1 that matters. Meaning you put up with the heartbreak or the pain or the loss of financial stability or whatever, to keep on blocking and tackling until you get it right, to fail until you get it right. It's just that, I mean, you know, unless you're dead, and who knows, maybe even not then, but I mean, and you can keep on trying to come back from it, come back.
I think it's so powerful that the storytelling right now, and this is kind of really where we're going with these highlights of the Know the Rules of Game, is that everyone has a story behind the scenes that we don't see, because you look at the Hollywood celebrities, you look at the people who are exceptionally wealthy, you look at the family office space, everyone thinks that they were either born into it, they were given to it, or life is so easy for them. And that story of, as you say, knocking, get it back up, and knocking, get it down. How many they have had health crises that are going on? How many are being played into what they go through to have that image or keep that awareness that they're successful, or that everything's fine with them, internalize that when you find out after the day that they passed, that they had all these elements, or you know, like hockey, you know, something very simple. You know, I'm a hockey fanatic. Of 25 years I've been watching the NHL, and season ticket holder, you know, my whole life, my whole passion going to, and I gave it up the last couple of years because I was just so busy running around, but it was an outlet for me to have a voice and, you know, rooting for my team and everything. And at the end of the playoffs, someone would get injured, or, I mean, you would know that someone played with a broken foot or a broken hand, or, you know, they had all these, you know, they couldn't skate because their hip was twisted, and yet they pushed through and they still won the cup. I believe that drive and that change, like you said, of getting knocked down and coming back up, is what makes success. And what drives you to be stronger. And might not be in the business, but it might be in your life of success and living, quality of living. And that's
sports does it too. I mean, I think you're perfectly, that's where sports teaches you, and you lose, you get back up, you get back up, you do whatever, get back up. That's true resilience.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that is resilience. That's the definition of resilience. And I think, I mean, you know, right now, how many people have had COVID and are recovered? How many, or are recovering? How many have lost people they love and are setting, how over and over and over again, or many of the same, you know, or all agglomerated. They've lost their businesses in some of the violence, and they were sick before, or somebody in their families were sick. How much of this, and how can you come back?
Right.
So I believe that is in fact the differential between somebody who's resilient and somebody who isn't.
Yes.
And you know, there's a lot of study into what we can do to help create resilient children and resilient young people. And you know what? It's not by being a helicopter parent and giving them everything.
You know, well, we're, you know, the second, you know, development we have going on with the social injustice and the social justice system, and the whole thing about Black Lives Matter and what's being done. You know, here we are, we're two white women, and in what we're seeing in the stories, and, you know, there was Share the Mic now, which was incredible, about giving a voice and helping, and what these incredible leaders have done, highlighting those stories and bringing it, that whole, you know, environment, I think is what compounds effective change and good change that we're seeing and bringing out there. So I love it. And I really believe that all of us can help advance and be better as human beings, as companies, as equity, equality, inclusion, and just be true empathy and compassion and everything you've been talking about, and making sure that we as a society embrace all of us as a loving family.
So I'm just going to say one thing I think is really important, and it's about this word empathy. There are words now that are being thrown around, you know, a lot. Transparency, and I mean, we all know we take this very seriously. There is empathy. I think very few people understand empathy. I think fewer people can demonstrate it, because it's really hard. And it's really hard to be in somebody else's shoes.
Yeah.
And I think it takes listening at, you know, being quiet, listening to other people and what they say that is really uncomfortable, and having things that are really uncomfortable. It makes, you know, you fidget, and staying in that moment and listening. And that's the only way we have to start to attack it right now. And it's not so easy to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. Even if you're saying you're doing it, you want to do it, it's really hard. So the one thing that my salon guest, Lorraine Harriton, who's head of Catalyst, said—
fabulous lady. I had the opportunity to be part of that. It was fantastic.
Yeah, she's fabulous, right? So what they are beginning to think about teaching empathy. And so I asked her, well, how do you do that? I mean, you know, psychologists can't really figure out that many ways. How are you doing it? They're thinking about AI and about virtual reality, and with VR, enhanced VR. Right. You can actually walk in somebody's shoes and see how people react to you, and all of those microaggressions.
Right. How cool.
You know, and so we may be, through science, to go back to our beginning, we may be able to show a little bit more of that. And even then, it won't touch the surface of understanding other people's lived experience, but it's a beginning.
Well, if you combine the AI or the science of being able to be put in someone else's shoes and walk somewhat, and then have the stories of all these other people that have gone through it, and combine it together, it creates well, that's just one person's experience. It becomes more of an inclusiveness of inside the shoes, you know, scientifically, people have lived it and what's been done, right? I think it's a huge thing. And I'd like to go ahead.
And listening.
Exactly.
And really
I want to highlight the definition of empathy: the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. And I believe there's twofold to that. There is the capacity to listen, which is my principle of the NDLC principles that just came out, and the core to go with it. I just want to take a moment here to pull it up for everyone and say what it is, because the principle of the NDLC with number 7, to listen, I have it right here, is never assume anything about anyone. Everyone has their own story, and that makes them who they are, which is exactly what you're talking about, right?
It is. It
And
is.
love that. So I want to thank you. This has been absolutely incredible. So I want to take a few minutes here to close out. I want to recap the verbiage of this crisis is that we're in chaos. We're no longer in crisis. We're in chaos. And the three rules are: number one, denial. I've always said no is not in my vocabulary. Number two, people remember how long you show up in a crisis. So know that you are defining yourself by your response. Make sure to channel your higher self or mission, your integrity, trustworthiness, humanity, and compassion in every reaction. Number three, you can come out of this crisis stronger and better. If forever change, make that your explicit goal. So I would love to close out with a tip. So give us a tip that we all can really embrace and move forward and really get that zen of what we're doing.
Okay. So each of us needs, no matter what role we're in at the moment, to become a trusted voice, the trustworthy voice in the room. That means that we, to the best of our human ability, capture truth and reality. And we capture it in the best, most on-point way we can, and we articulate it. Now, not meanly, not cruelly, not nothing like that, but that we sort of look at what reality really is and try to articulate it that way, so that when we speak, people believe us. When we speak and people believe us, we add to the general good sort of floating around there, out there, and another trustworthy voice, because we have so many untrustworthy voices in our world right now, and that is only going to get worse with false information, with deep fake kinds of things on the internet, with false news, whatever, whether you're red or blue or purple or green, I don't care. It's everywhere now, and the ability to tell truth from fiction, truth from lie, truth from malicious lie, is something that's on every one of our shoulders, in crisis and not in crisis. So I think our goal needs to be the trustworthy voice in the room, or a trustworthy voice in the room, and demand that our leaders are the trustworthy voices in the room too.
I love it. I love it. It's in real estate, and the work that I've done for all these decades is about being the trusted advisor, be the local trusted advisor.
Yeah.
Then it took it nationally and global. And that voice is that our next chief centerfold is Liz Tumulty, this former CBS president. And her thing is that, Desiree, she made a comment during the interview that when the networks got all their news, CBS, NBC, ABC, it was all fact-checked. It was all given at the same time.
Yeah.
And we all went with it. Different ways, different things, but it was all fact-checked. Now, information is very rarely fact-checked, and it's disseminated as if it's truth, and not all it's sometimes maliciously and sometimes not. But the idea is that it's really tough to take a deep dive to find out what is or isn't, even with the good intentions, even of the best people doing it. And that being said, our media platforms have changed so radically, and our yen to know the news before the news happens is huge. So thank you for this incredible time, and an honor to have you on our podcast for Know the Rules of the Game. I always said that know the rules of the game to play the game, and this is really what crisis management is about, and going, as we say now, the complexity of chaos. So how do we get a hold of you, and how do we follow you and all the great things you're doing?
I've got a little bit of wind coming out here, so
it's all good. It's all good.
That's all good. Temin and Company. We're on the website. We have a website, www.teminandco.com. And on it, we have all of our white papers. We have all of a lot of things I write for Forbes and other places, a lot of information that may be helpful. Our phone number is 212-588-8788. Even though there's nobody in the office, we're checking that every 30 minutes throughout the day. So call if we can help. And, you know, info@teminandco.com, TEMINANDCO.com.
Excellent. So again, thank you. This has been incredible. The information and our shariness of really about compassion to change the narrative to help everyone be successful, right? The more we can help everyone be successful is good. So again, I'm Desirée Patno. I'm the host of Know the Rules of the Game. You can reach us at NAWRB.com, our newsletter that comes out every Friday, our support for our foundation of helping women with a gender lens, not just women themselves, but everything has to have a macro and have the women. So we touch anything that has to do with touches land. So any capacity that touches land, it's all real estate, right? And whether it's fintech, whether it's health and development, like we're talking about crisis, and especially in the environment too. So you can reach us at NAWRB.com. This is aired on Anchor, on iTunes, on YouTube, and all the different media platforms, including our magazine and our website. So thank you all for tuning in. And again, thank you, Davia. I really appreciate all the stuff that's going on. So everyone have an incredible, blessed day. And stay tuned for next Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for our next Know the Rules of the Game podcast. Thank you and have an incredible time. All right, take care.